So, lifetime value potential summarized is the revenue that you could be earning with a current customer or prospect. So it's not what you are earning, it's what you could be earning, with a single customer or with a single prospect. And before I get into our next equation, I'm going to do a couple of definitions on some abbreviations that I just made up. So we're going to have to get into our own acronym library at some point in the future. So what I've now affectionately called the TSWID, which is the total spend on what you do. So if you look at a customer, and I encourage all of you to kind of go through your mental banks right now and pick one good customer of yours, and think what is their total spend on what you do. So in the example that we have there, using a large multinational like Boeing, so Boeing buys X million dollars of Y. Boeing buys $300 million of carbon fiber material, and ultimately you make Y. So it's that total spend on what you do is the TSWID. The other acronym that I think we need to understand is HMS, which is how many suppliers. So Boeing buys Y from Z, different suppliers. So Boeing buys carbon fiber material from 5 different suppliers, and you want to be one of Z. So you want to be one of those 5. So you either want to replace somebody or you want to get them to use 6 different suppliers instead of 5 different suppliers. So here's where the math gets a little more complicated. And I've got a little worksheet that we'll walk through quickly, and I can also share with you. But this idea of the total spend on what you do, so divided by how many suppliers, times revenue years, gives you your lifetime value potential. So putting that into numbers, and I'll give you a second to absorb that. Again, total spend, how many suppliers, times your revenue years give you your lifetime value potential. So if a company spends $50 million on what you do, and they spend it with 10 different suppliers, that's an average spend of $5 million per supplier. So the math in the parentheses. And then, multiplying that by 5 revenue years would give you, as a single supplier, $25 million in lifetime value potential. So it takes your mindset from, my salesperson just sent a $5,000 quote, I hope we win it, to we've now got an opportunity to present a $5,000 quote to a company that presents the potential of earning us $25 million over the next 5 years. Those should be entirely different conversations. If they're not, then you should really be looking at, your organization and also inwardly at yourself, going, why the hell are we treating a $5,000 opportunity the same way we would treat a $25 million opportunity? And we have watched this happen. We have seen people literally fill out spreadsheets and send them in on multi-million dollar opportunities and hope that they want them. This happens almost way, way, way more than you would think. And it probably happens in your own organizations. So as I mentioned, we've got a little calculator that I'll just kind of walk through, briefly here. And it's got, 2 columns to it. The left-hand column, would be how would you use this with a potential new customer? The right-hand column adds a few more calculations for you if you're using it with an existing customer. And we'll quickly go through the basic information, company name, location, what's their total revenue, which should be readily available. If you can't find it, let me know and I'll find it for you. We've got sources for that. An estimate of how much do they spend on what you do. So again, if that company name is Boeing and you sell carbon fiber material and they spend, $500 million on it, that's your number your numbers that go, or your percentage that goes in there. And that gives you that estimated annual spend on what you do. So if you make something that a $500 million, $500 million company is spending 10% on, they're spending somewhere in the neighborhood of $50 million on that product. Then you get into the supplier information. So if you've got, in this case, I put in 20 suppliers. So just, in round numbers, your average annual revenue per supplier is $2.5 million. If you get into that company and you keep them for 5 years and you get them up to that range, you've got a ballpark lifetime value potential of $12.5 million. So that's how some of those basic numbers flow out to give you a lifetime value potential. And keeping in mind that the trick to this is that first order or first opportunity is likely going to be a fraction of any of these numbers. It's going to be measured in thousands or tens of thousands of dollars, most likely. And the trick is being able to identify the ones, that are the start of high lifetime value relationships, and also identify the ones that aren't. Because if you're going to invest, your organization's time to win a $10,000 job with a customer that has the lifetime potential to do $10,000 worth of work, you've invested a lot of time and energy from your organization on something that's only going to pay off one time, and at a marginal level. So that can suck up a lot of resources within an organization, not just sales wise, but also operationally. If you have a lot of customers and a lot of small customers that don't have a lot of lifetime value potential, they're disruptive to the organization and they make your life harder than it needs to be. So, looking at new customers, you want to make sure that you identify the ones that have high lifetime value potential and also the ones that don't. And both of those are really important. Moving over to the right-hand side, when we get into our existing customers piece, the top section is largely the same, as is the supplier information. The lifetime value gives us the same lifetime value, but what it does bring down is, what's your current share? So if you're doing, in this case, $250,000 a year with this customer, but they have the potential to be doing much more than that, it calculates what your share of that average annual revenue is. So 250 from 2.5 million, leaves you with $2.25 million in what I would refer to as uncaptured revenue. That's room for you to grow to just be average amongst your competitors if you were to take this and average it out. So if you're only doing $250,000 a year, but the potential is much higher than that, in this case, you end up with an estimated lifetime value of $1.25 million. Still good business, but you've left $11.25 million on the table. And that would be a shame because they're already a customer. You're already in their system. You already have proven performance. You've already done, you've already built relationships. What are you going to do in order to get a much bigger share of, that uncaptured or unrealized lifetime value? There's a ton of opportunity with your existing customers if they're the right existing customers, and you've got to figure out, who's who on that list. So as I mentioned to Adam when we started, I used his company without his permission, and I used made up numbers, Adam, just so you know. You can tell us if we're close or not, but I wanted to put this into a little bit of a story to just bring it to life a little bit. So SignFX, owned by Adam Brown, who's with us today, manufactures and installs interior and exterior signage on commercial buildings. For the past few years, they've been doing about $75,000 worth of work for E.F. Howard, a made-up regional general contractor. E.F. Howard is a $100 million GC, and they work with a handful of other sign companies. They build about 15 buildings a year, and their average sign spend is about $100,000. So if you take that data and you push it into this little calculator, and I even expanded it just a touch, the basics are up above. So they spend about, 1.5, about 1.5% of their overall spend or revenue spent on, the TISWID, total spend on what you do of about, $1.5 million. And let's say, for example's sake, there's 3 different suppliers. So the average annual revenue per supplier is $500,000. If you can build a relationship there and grow and keep that business for 5 years, and many businesses keep their relationships for much longer than that, you've got a calculated lifetime value potential of $2.5 million. Okay, so pretty good business. If we go down to what are we actually doing, we're getting about $75,000 a year from them. So $75,000 of $500,000 in potential is about 15%. So that's that second number down. So the share of average annual revenue, we're getting 15% of what we could be getting, and we're leaving 85% on the table. And our share of the total average revenue is 5%. So, we're about a 5% player with this business. And we've got, $425,000 a year in uncaptured annual revenue. So there's that much headroom, again, to just be average. You don't even have to take, even a more of a share than what you might be, equal with your competitors. But obviously a considerable amount of room for the business. And then, so, now you've got an estimated lifetime value of, something doesn't seem quite right there. What did I do wrong? My math's a little off there. But I think at the end of the day, yes, our unrealized lifetime revenue comes in at $2.1 million. So obviously, considerable amount of revenue available to this business from this single customer. So, excusing my mathematical error, it seems, or else I'm just not getting my own math. Adam, I'm interested. You had your mic working earlier. If this conjures any thoughts for you.
Yeah, it makes me want to go through my customer list and run a bazillion spreadsheets, find out who's who. But I also think you can have a lifetime customer. What stage are you at in those revenue years?
Yep.
Are you in the beginning? Are you on the tail end? Are you in the middle? How much have they spent with you previously? You've already had a 4-year relationship. How much longer is it going to last?
Yep.
We have several customers like that we've worked with for a number of years. Well, how much longer is that life cycle going to last?
Right. Yeah. And I've also got some models, and I'm trying to keep this one pretty simple so that people start to shift into this mindset. But there's ramp up time. You're not going to go from 0 to $500,000 a month or a year necessarily with every customer. So there's a ramp up and potentially a ramp down on the back end. But I think at the end of the day, the trick is, doing exactly what you said, which is I want to go look at my customers. I want to go see what kind of share do I really think I have, and where's the opportunity, and then focus my team and my energy on capturing more of that.
The other piece, one more comment I might make is, intuitively, the first thing I do is, who are my best revenue customers? And those are the ones I'm going to research first.
Right.
Well, not really, because those are the ones that are already spending.
Right.
You're looking to get if you're doing the customer mining, you actually want to look at the ones with the most potential, not necessarily the highest revenue spent.
Exactly. And that's why, if you're ranking your customers by revenue, you've got to look at the lower and the middle. You got to look at the whole thing, because,
Right.
You may be getting $300,000 out of a customer and their total spend may be $320,000, right? You can't squeeze more, juice out of that orange. But somewhere down at customer number 23, maybe one with enormous upside potential. And so now you've got to shift your attention there and go, how can I capture, more of that business? So you're absolutely right.
Would you think that the key driving factor that is your ICP?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, you've got to.
So you might want to go through a study of making sure that you're doing people that land and have the definition of the ICP for your business first, and then do a lifetime value estimate on each one of those.
Yeah, I would suggest, and I know you're heavy into CRM. I would add an ICP fit field to your CRM so that you can run reports that combine, revenue, ICP fit, and then the company, and then ultimately, lifetime value potential should be something that everyone gets into their systems as well, because then you can start to kind of sort and figure out, okay, well, how much share do I actually have, and what's the gap, what's the space I can get after. One thing that's really important and one thing that you can leverage in this is, looking at customers that you have that have multiple locations, multiple facilities. Those are great areas for, growing and capturing more lifetime value. Largely being able to leverage your experience that you have with other operations or other facilities, and the fact that you're already an approved supplier. Especially as you get into working with larger companies, the challenge of becoming an approved supplier is often the biggest hurdle to get over. And then once you have that, the people that are on the buying side, know that you've crossed the T's and dotted the I's, and that you're somebody that they can relatively easily do business with. I mentioned Boeing earlier. You could be in one Boeing facility and you could probably have a full-time team working on expanding your business across, the entire Boeing universe of, not only owned and operated companies, but subsidiaries and suppliers. I mean, some of these companies are so massive that you could, like I said, deploy a whole team on growing that business. And all of that said, you then need to be careful that you don't end up with a concentration issue in something like aerospace in a pandemic. But that's a whole nother conversation that we could have at some point. So cool. So, and Adam, you kind of led right into this for us. The idea of identifying high lifetime value customers and prospects, and to your point, it really starts with the ICP. David, we've got a couple of slides from last month's session that we pulled in here that we'll just kind of quickly review, and we can point people back to this deck if they didn't get a chance to see that one.
Right. As Eric mentioned, we went over this last time. I think the segue that Adam you're hitting on, I think what was really eye-opening for me in terms of the lifetime value calculation is the total available opportunity there, the number of suppliers they may be using, right? So, when we look at, creating ideal customer profile and revenue size is part of the factor, that informs, how big a company is and potentially how many suppliers of your product that they're using. But really, it starts with an ideal customer profile, and not only aligning the team around the types of people and companies that are best fit for your business, but really that guidepost to point you in the direction of the highest lifetime value customers for your business. As Eric's hitting on some of these concepts, it's the ICP is a foundation, but there's exercises that build onto this to make sure that you guys are fully activating that, and the team knows not only the types of companies and contacts that are the best fit, but the types of relationships they're going to be challenged to build. So when we develop an ideal customer profile, and again, the word customer has many definitions. It can be a partner, entities you sell through and entities that you sell to. So when we talk about an ideal customer profile from an account standpoint, What do they call? What do they call? What do they call themselves? Who are their customers? What types of attributes do their products have? All of these are attributes that would inform, who your ideal customer is from a company standpoint. And in terms of the contact standpoint, I think we have the contact slide here as well, Eric.
I think I dropped that one.
In terms of the contacts, it's about how many, what types of buyers, what types of titles, what types of roles are within these accounts that your team is going to be creating these relationships with to really maximize that high lifetime value. And that's really, foundationally it. We have the handout from last time. If you guys click on the handouts tab, we have our ICP worksheet there. And it really kind of, it's just a worksheet with these types of questions. Feel free to use it. Reach out if you guys have any questions on it. But, it really starts here. And then how you guys activate this within your business, is the path towards unlocking high lifetime value relationships.
Thanks, David. All right. Well, we're in the home stretch of today's conversation. So just kind of talking about, how do we start to make a shift from sending quotes to winning, big high lifetime value relationships. It really starts with, is it $5,000 or is it $5 million? And can you spot the difference? When you look at it, when you look at an opportunity, are you looking at it going, this is a $5,000 quote, or this is the start of a $5 million relationship?
Right.
You've got to get into that mindset, and you've got to teach your team, and you've got to nurture your team into getting them to look at this and think about it. And we're passionate about this because we see this not being capitalized on every day. We see website inquiries come in for businesses, that are the start of, potentially gigantic relationships that go unanswered or go unresponded to. And it, every time that happens, as we say, a little piece of our soul dies because we're so passionate about growth. And we want to make sure that as leaders, first, we can tell the difference. And then second, we're teaching our organization to see and understand the difference.
Yeah. Eric, I think you hit on the starting gun concept, right? The quote is a starting gun. The initial inquiry is a starting gun to the race to not only, win maybe the initial business, but to start that relationship. It's the first impression. It's, it's a quote, sending a quote out and losing a bid is not the ending in a lot of these situations. And I think that's the number one thing I've taken away.
Right. So just a few thoughts to share. Number one, shifting your perspective to lifetime value. That's what we spent our whole morning talking about today. The second would be to embrace team selling. High lifetime value sales, is a team sport. It's becoming more and more a team sport. Businesses just can't, the idea of the sales guy with the order pad going around and writing orders. It's not reality in high lifetime value businesses. Fully developing your ideal customer profiles, which we've talked about already. I think really, to Adam's point, going through and making sure that we're building thriving relationships with our current high lifetime value customers. Then obviously we want to start and nurture new relationships with ICP prospects and fire that starting gun and get them into the system, ultimately turn them into customers, and then grow them, over months and years. And then lastly, stop wasting time on low value customers and prospects. If your salespeople are putting low value prospects into your CRM so that they're ticking some box or they're looking good on some report, you're burning time and you're burning energy in your business that's never going to pay off. There's value in stopping doing some things so that you can do other things, and stopping wasting time on low value customers and prospects is a big one. And then lastly, just to kind of a touch on leading and lagging indicators, as we move down this lifetime value path, we want to make sure that we understand what impact it's having on our business. And I would hope that we've got a good understanding of leading and lagging indicators. Some of the leading and lagging indicators, that I would incorporate into a lifetime value program would be things like, new ICP relationship starts. And it's truly a relationship start. When we have that, we should know when we have that first conversation with an ICP customer, and we should keep track of that. We should keep score, because that's a big deal, as are those first opportunities. Taking a look at what's your ICP to non-ICP ratio. You want that to be, 100% ICP. Probably not realistic in most organizations, but certainly something to strive for. How many high lifetime value opportunities do we have? I put down your funnel metrics, your sales funnel metrics, but you want to make sure your funnel is aligned with high lifetime value sales. Otherwise, your numbers will get all wonky. Customer satisfaction. Are we checking, whether or not our customers are satisfied on a regular basis? And then, a number that a lot of people like to work with is a net promoter score. It does give you some, empirical judgment of, the strength of your relationships and whether or not, your customers and contacts would promote your business to others. Lagging indicators, the biggest ones are, revenue and profit. Again, we can't really do anything about those things once they've happened. Customer retention rate kind of sits on both, because you can affect your customer retention rate, but that's based on improving things like customer satisfaction, making sure that your products are in line and delivering on the promises that you make, making sure that your pricing is competitive, et cetera. So those are just some kind of leading and lagging indicators that can be used to help you kind of keep an eye on this lifetime value concept and leverage it to understand more thoroughly what's happening in your business. And so with that, that's it. So thank you all for joining us today. Mics are open and available. If anybody's got any questions and answers, would love to have a little bit of a chat. If not, then we'll let everybody go. Anybody have any thoughts they want to share? Anybody scream?
Big elephant, one bite at a time. In his situation, if there's 500, regular customers, is there any advice on where to start on evaluating that customer list?
Okay. I think, Adam, a number of things that I mentioned. So I would work to append, some data to your customer list. Number one would be, if you've got, any kind of duplicates, consolidate them. One client we work with had, 3,000 customers, but, probably 100 of them were some permutation of the same company. So you want to kind of clean that up a bit. And then, going through and appending, an ICP fit. You can use, they're an A fit, B fit, C fit, D fit. So appending that to the data. Obviously, you've got your revenue information, and then going through the process of, figuring out what that lifetime value potential is. And, we can work up a workbook, and Adam, we'll make sure we share that with you. That's kind of a template for breaking this down. But those are the big things, for doing it. And then, the other part of it is then becoming comfortable with, like I said, it being an educated guess. This is an art. blended with a little bit of science. And if you get kind of hung up on whether it's $1 million or $1 million, $1,100,000, then you'll never get through 500 customers. You got to kind of take a swag at it and be comfortable with that, and just use it. The ones that have high potential will be pretty obvious, and they'll jump out at you. But that's kind of how I would tackle that one. And to your point, I wouldn't necessarily start, at the top of my list. I might move down that list and go, okay, let's scan 100 to 500 and see if anything jumps out at us. Any other thoughts, questions, comments? Yep, we'll send a recording to the session for sure. Bob Gross, thanks for joining. Mike Walls, thanks for joining. Good to chat with you and at you all. Any other questions, comments before we wrap? All right. Well, thank you for taking time this morning to spend it with us. We always appreciate it, and we'll talk to you all soon.